AITA for refusing to go back after my stepmother kicked me out on my birthday? I turned 18 a few days ago, and what should have been a celebration ended up being confirmation of something I had suspected for years. My dad never really loved me. Or at least, not enough for it to matter when his new wife decided there was no longer room for me in their perfect family. The worst part is that, even though I've tried to be strong, part of me still feels like a 5-year-old who just wants his dad to love him. My mom died when I was very young. I barely have any memories of her, and everything I know is thanks to my maternal grandfather. He always tried to tell me stories about her, but my dad hated it when he did. I think he never got over her, or at least that's what I want to think, because if not, the alternative is that he simply never cared. After my mom passed away, my dad went from relationship to relationship, as if he were collecting women. He was never alone for long. He always had a new girlfriend, and it seemed like none of them lasted long enough for me to care until she arrived. I don't know exactly what my dad saw in his current wife, but from the first moment, I knew things were going to change. The way she looked at me, like I was a nuisance in her new life with my dad, made it clear from day one. And it wasn't long before she stopped hiding her contempt for me. At first, I tried to please her, I swear. I was always kind to her. I tried to talk to her. I helped around the house more than I should have, but nothing was enough. I don't know if I simply reminded her that my dad had a life before her, if she saw me as an obstacle to her ideal family, or if she simply hated me for no reason. But the point is that she did everything possible to make me feel like a stranger in my own home. And my dad never did anything about it. If she said I should do all the chores, he agreed and said it was to teach me responsibility. If she insinuated that I was being disrespectful when I wasn't even speaking, he scolded me without a second thought. If she complained that I was spending too much money, he forced me to get a job, even though my school was demanding. Every time I tried to talk to him, every time I tried to explain to him that she treated me like garbage, he told me I was exaggerating, that she just wanted the best for me, that I had to make an effort to get along with her because she was part of the family now. But the truth was, he had never been a part of my family. And after years of putting up with all that, on my 18th birthday, I woke up to the news that I had to leave. They told me they needed my room for the baby that was on the way, that I was an adult now and had to learn to fend for myself, that surely I could find another place to live, that it was nothing personal, that they were doing it for the baby's sake. As if I hadn't been his son too, as if my life didn't matter. I tried to fight. I tried to argue that legally they couldn't kick me out without notice, but my dad just shrugged and told me he had already consulted with a lawyer, that I no longer had rights in his house, that it was better for everyone if I left. I had never felt so much pain in my life. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have enough money to get an apartment, and the only person I could think of was my grandfather. He was the only one who had always been there for me, but I also knew he didn't have much money. He had been a teacher and could barely support himself. But what else could I do? So, I packed my things, feeling miserable, and left, feeling completely alone in the world. What I didn't know at the time was that my grandfather had a plan that would change my life and reveal truths that my dad never wanted me to discover. I arrived at my grandfather's house with a suitcase in one hand and my dignity barely held in the other. I didn't have many options, and although it hurt to admit it, I didn't have a plan either. I didn't know what I would do next, how I would pay for college, how I would survive without any real support. When my grandfather opened the door and saw me there, my face still red with anger and my eyes swollen from being on the verge of tears the whole way, he didn't say anything. He just let me in and hugged me. It was the first genuine display of affection I had received in a long time, and it took me by surprise how much I needed it. He let me sit down, drink some water, and breathe before asking what had happened. Although I'm sure he already suspected. After all, it was no secret that my dad had never been a present father, much less that his wife treated me like dirt. I told him everything, from the moment I woke up that day to the instant I walked through his door. I didn't try to contain my anger. I told him what I really thought of my dad, of his wife, of how they had kicked me out without even blinking. I told him that I had never felt part of that house, that since my mom died, my dad had done the bare minimum to raise me, as if he were simply fulfilling an obligation instead of being a real father. My grandfather didn't interrupt once, he just listened. And when I finished talking, he remained silent for a moment. I knew this day would come, he finally said. in a tone so serious that it made me nervous. But don't worry, you don't have to go back to them. His certainty surprised me. I expected him to tell me to try to talk to my dad, to try to fix it, to give him another chance, but no. Are you serious? I don't know how I'll pay for college, I admitted, feeling more vulnerable than I would like. I don't have enough money to support myself. That won't be a problem, my grandfather replied without hesitation. That answer left me bewildered. How can it not be a problem? He sighed and looked out the window, as if deciding how much to tell me. There's something you need to know, he finally said, looking back at me. Something your father never told you. My heart started to beat faster. What? Your mother came from a very wealthy family. That information left me speechless for a second. What? They weren't just well off? They were rich. And when she passed away, they left money for you. My thoughts began to race. So my dad had access to that money? Yes, but there's something else. He didn't want you to know that money existed. My hands clenched into fists without me realizing it. Are you telling me I've been working, begging him for the bare minimum, while he had money saved for me? All this time? My grandfather nodded, his expression filled with regret. I never agreed with it. I told him many times that he should use it to secure your future, but he always refused. I felt a wave of rage burning inside me. I couldn't believe it. All the time I spent worrying about surviving, about how I would pay for my studies, while he had access to a fund that was meant for me. How could he do this to me? I asked, more to myself than to my grandfather. Because he never saw you as his priority. His priority was always himself. And now, with his new wife and his baby on the way, he decided he no longer had any use for you. The blow of truth left me breathless. My dad hadn't just kicked me out, he had robbed me. And worst of all, he didn't seem to feel the slightest bit of guilt about it. Is there any of that money left? I asked, fearing the answer. My grandfather clenched his jaw. That's something we need to find out. I barely slept that night. My head was spinning with the information my grandfather had given me. My mother had left money for me, enough to pay for my college, and probably more. And my dad had hidden it all this time. And worst of all, was that money still there, or had he already spent it? My grandfather didn't sleep much either. I found him awake in the kitchen very early, drinking coffee with a frown. I knew he was upset, probably just like me. But there was something else in his gaze, something I hadn't noticed before. Determination. We have to talk to a lawyer, he said bluntly when I sat across from him. A lawyer? Yes. If the money still exists, we have to get it back. If he spent it, well, we'll see what can be done. Just the idea of confronting my dad like that made my blood boil, but at the same time, I couldn't let him get away with it. That money was mine, my mother left it for me, and he had no right to decide that I didn't deserve it. But there was something I didn't understand. If my mom came from a wealthy family, why did they never try to contact me? It was a question I had avoided asking the night before, because I was too angry with my dad. But now that my mind was clearer, it seemed impossible to ignore. My grandfather sighed. It's not that they didn't want to, it's that they couldn't. What do you mean they couldn't? Your father made sure they had no access to you. After your mother passed away, he cut off all contact with her family. He didn't allow them to see you or talk to you. He made it clear that if they tried anything legal, he would fight with everything he had. But if they had so much money, couldn't they have one custody? My grandfather shook his head. Maybe, but they never tried. They told me it was too painful to see you, because you looked so much like your mother. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me understood that losing my mother had been difficult for them, but another part was angry. Did they really leave me alone with a man who didn't love me, just because it was difficult for them? But this wasn't the time to think about that. So what do we do now? I asked. My grandfather took out his phone and showed it to me. I talked to them last night, after you went to sleep. My eyes widened in surprise. What? Yes. I told them what happened. I told them you were here, that your father kicked you out, that you had been living without knowing anything about the money they left for you. My heart was pounding. And what did they say? They want to see you. My mind went blank for a moment. I didn't know them. I had no idea what they were like. I didn't know if they would love me or if they just felt sorry for me. But there was something in me, a broken part that had been searching for belonging for years, that wanted to say yes without hesitation. But there was something else about all this that worried me. What if there's no money left? My grandfather looked at me seriously. Then we fight. That afternoon we went to see a lawyer. We didn't have much evidence, But my grandfather had records of some deposits he had received in the past from my mother's family. They weren't directly in my name, but in my father's name, which complicated things. The lawyer explained that, depending on how the trust was structured, if it still existed, we might have a chance to recover it. But if my dad had already spent it, and the money had been legally transferred to his name, things would be more complicated. I left that meeting with my head full of doubts and accumulated rage, but the answers would come sooner than I expected. Because as we were driving home, my phone rang. It was my dad. I let it ring. I had no intention of talking to him. But then a message arrived. Please, come home. I need to talk to you. This is important. And then another. You have no idea what you're doing. This is a mistake. And another. If you keep this up, things are going to get ugly. Fear ran down my spine. My father was desperate, and that could only mean one thing. There was something he didn't want us to find out. I didn't reply to my dad's messages. I didn't even open them. I just watched them appear on the screen and left them there. But my grandfather saw them. He's nervous, he said with a dry smile. If he's threatening, it's because he knows we have him against the ropes. I looked at him, confused. Do you think he really spent the money? I don't know. But if he did, then he's scared because we could get him into legal trouble. And if he didn't, he must be panicking because now you know the money exists. That made sense. But what didn't make sense was the tone of his messages. My dad had never been affectionate or concerned about me. He had never cared what I did, as long as it didn't cause him any trouble. And now, out of nowhere, he was begging and threatening at the same time. I couldn't sleep that night. The next morning, my grandfather woke me up early. Get dressed, we're leaving. Where to? To see your maternal family. My stomach dropped. I wasn't ready for this. I didn't know what to expect, but part of me wanted to meet them. Not for the money, but because they were the only thing I had left of my mother. We arrived in a neighborhood that was clearly in another league compared to where my grandfather and I lived. Large houses, expensive cars, immaculate gardens. My grandfather looked at me before getting out of the car. Breathe. Don't worry about anything. Just be yourself. Trust yourself. Although my hands were sweating, we were greeted by a tall man with gray hair, dressed in a designer sweater and impeccable trousers. I recognized him from the few photos my grandfather had. It was my mother's brother. My God, he said as soon as he saw me. You're just like her. I didn't know what to say. I felt awkward. I wasn't used to being looked at with so much emotion. He led us into a huge room with elegant armchairs and a lit fireplace, even though it wasn't cold. There were my maternal grandparents. My grandfather looked serious, but my grandmother had tears in her eyes. We can't change the past, she said, but we can fix the future. And that was it. We sat and talked for hours. They asked me many questions about my life, my childhood, my studies. They apologized over and over for not being there. They explained that it was too painful for them after losing my mother, but that didn't justify their absence. And then came the subject of the money. My uncle was straight to the point. When your mother passed away, we set up a trust for you. The idea was that you would receive it when you turned 18, but only if you were still living in your father's house. I frowned. What? It was a mistake on our part. We thought that way he would be forced to take good care of you because he would know that the money would come to you sooner or later. But we never thought he would hide it from you. My chest filled with rage. So he's had access to the money all this time? My maternal grandfather nodded. The trust was designed to cover all your expenses, school, clothes, food, anything you needed. And every so often we sent him more money to make sure you never lacked anything. I felt a hollowness in my stomach. I had to work to pay for my own things. My dad made me believe there was no money. My uncle's face hardened. Then we have a bigger problem than we thought. Is there any of that money left? I asked, hoping he hadn't touched it all. That's what we're going to find out, said my maternal grandfather. He took out his phone and dialed a number. I'm going to call our lawyer. Fear mixed with adrenaline inside me. The silence in the room grew heavy as my maternal grandfather spoke to his lawyer. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, only fragments. We need immediate access, possible fraud, check the bank statements. I could barely process what was happening. My dad had received money for my education, my well-being, and I never saw a penny of it. While I worked at a fast food restaurant after school just to buy myself clothes and pay for outings with friends, he lived carefree with his new wife, without me knowing that this money existed. Finally, my maternal grandfather hung up and turned to me. It will take a few hours, but the lawyer will be able to access the trust information. Then we'll see exactly what your father has done with the money. I just nodded, feeling a pit in my stomach. The rest of the day was a blur. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept returning to the same question. How far had my dad gone? Had he spent it all? Had he hidden it in another account? In the afternoon, we got a call. My maternal grandfather put it on speakerphone so we could all hear. I have the trust information, the lawyer's voice said, and you are not going to be happy with what I've discovered. A shiver ran down my spine. The original fund was well structured. Your mother made sure the money was secure until you turned 18. However, when she passed away, your father had partial access, only to cover essential expenses related to you. But a few years ago, he did something very suspicious. We remained silent, waiting. Shortly after marrying his new wife, he transferred a large portion of the trust to a personal account. Technically, he wasn't violating any rules of the original contract, but the money was intended for you. The air caught in my throat. How much money is left? Asked my uncle, his tone sharp. The lawyer paused. Almost nothing. I don't know what I expected, but hearing those words hit me like a punch in the gut. How much did he spend? I managed to ask, feeling the rage rising in my throat. Around 90% of the total. My mind went blank. 90%? That's impossible, I said, barely finding my voice. What did he spend it on? We can request a breakdown of transactions, but in general, it appears he used the money to maintain his lifestyle, house payments, cars, trips. He also made transfers to accounts that are not in his name, which could indicate that he was hiding it. I covered my face with my hands. All the money my mother had left for me stolen. My dad kicked me out of the house because he no longer needed me, because he could no longer use my trust to maintain his comfortable life with his new wife. And when he realized I knew the truth, he started calling me, asking me to come back, pleading. Not because he wanted me back, but because if I wasn't in his house, he couldn't justify continuing to receive money in my name. Can we sue him? Asked my maternal grandfather. Yes, but the process can be lengthy. However, there is something we can do more quickly. We can freeze his accounts and demand that he return what remains of the trust. Do it. My maternal grandfather replied immediately. I could barely react. I felt dizzy, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let my dad get away with this. That night, I barely slept. My head was too full of thoughts, rage, disbelief. This whole thing was a nightmare. I spent my life believing my dad was just a cold, distant guy, but I never imagined he was despicable enough to steal the money my mother had left for my future. And the worst part was that he knew I would eventually find out. That's why the messages, the calls, the desperate attempt to get me to come home. He didn't want to fix things. He wanted to make sure I couldn't do anything against him. But now I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to stand idly by. The next morning, my maternal grandfather woke me up early. The lawyer has already filed the request to freeze your father's accounts, he said as soon as he saw me open my eyes. In a few hours, his access to the money will be blocked. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and anxiety. That means he won't be able to use what's left? Exactly. And if we want, we can formally sue him to recover what was illegally spent. I just nodded, feeling that all of this was just beginning. Shortly after, my phone started ringing. It was my dad again. I ignored the call. Then a message arrived. What the hell did you do? I stared at the screen. A minute later, another message. My accounts are frozen. I can't pay anything. What the heck do you think you're doing? Finally, it rang again. This time, I answered. What do you want? I said dryly. On the other end of the line, my dad was breathing heavily. You can't do this. You have no idea what you're causing. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh yeah, enlighten me. You don't know anything about how money works, he growled. Do you know how hard it's been to maintain everything? The house, the bills, the lifestyle you were used to. Are you serious? I interrupted him, feeling the rage boiling inside me. My lifestyle? I had to get a job because you made me believe there was no money for me. That money wasn't just for you, he tried to argue. It was used for the family. Your new family, I spat back. There was silence on the other end. Look, he continued, his voice lower, as if trying to calm himself. We can fix this. Just come home. We can talk about it in person. I laughed again, humorlessly. What for? So you can manipulate me like you always have. I'm not manipulating you, he growled. You're my... No, I said, exasperated. Not when your wife decided I was excess baggage in the house. I reminded him. Another silence. You'll regret this, he finally said, his voice icy. I doubt it, I replied before hanging up. The rest of the day was a roller coaster of emotions. The lawyer confirmed that my father's accounts were blocked. He could no longer access what remained of the trust. If he wanted to recover anything, he had to face the music and answer to justice. And although I knew it wasn't going to be easy, for the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my own life. But this wasn't over, because my dad wasn't the type to give up easily. And I would soon realize he was willing to do anything to try to regain his comfortable lifestyle. I expected my dad to try to contact me again, to continue with his veiled threats or his false pleas. But what I didn't expect was what happened the next day. I was barely waking up when my grandfather came into my room with the phone in his hand and a look of absolute anger. What happened? I asked immediately, feeling a bad premonition. Your father is trying to sue us. My mind went blank. What? He says we're defaming him, that we're causing him unjustified economic harm. It took me a few seconds to process the information. Are you telling me that after robbing me, after kicking me out of the house, he now has the nerve to say that we're ruining his life? Basically, yes. It was ridiculous. I couldn't believe it. Can he do that? He can try, said my grandfather, crossing his arms. But the lawyer is already handling it. If he thinks he can intimidate us with a lawsuit, he's more desperate than we thought. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What do we do now? We'll meet with the lawyer later to prepare our defense, my grandfather replied. But don't worry, we have enough evidence that he misappropriated money that didn't belong to him. I sighed and ran my hands over my face. I can't believe he's doing this. Yes, you can, said my grandfather with a bitter half-smile. You know him well. And he was right. My dad had always been like this. He always got his way, always found a way to avoid the consequences of his actions. But this time I wasn't going to let him. Later, at the lawyer's office, they explained the strategy. It's a weak case on his part, he assured us. There is no legal basis for his lawsuit, and everything points to the fact that he is only trying to pressure you into withdrawing the action against him. So what do we do? I asked. Nothing. Let him try whatever he wants. We continue forward with the recovery of the money. But my dad wouldn't stop there. That same night, I got another message from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've done. You're ruining everything. I hope you're ready for what's coming. I blocked the number without replying. My grandfather was right. My dad was losing control. And when someone like him feels cornered, they can become dangerous. I expected my dad to try something else, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. 2 days after the meeting with the lawyer, we received an official notification. My dad had decided to countersue. But that wasn't the worst part. In his lawsuit, he claimed that my maternal grandfather and I had extorted him into giving us the money, that we had manipulated him with false accusations, and that he was now suffering severe emotional damage from the betrayal of his own son. I stared at the document in disbelief. This guy is crazy, I said, running a hand over my face. He's more like desperate, replied my maternal grandfather, his teeth clenched. He knows he's going to lose, so he's trying to make us spend money on lawyers, make us doubt, make everything more complicated. So what now? Now we stick to the plan. The lawyer intervened, sitting opposite us with an expression of total calm. What he is doing is a cheap move. He has no proof of anything, and we have proof of everything he has done. This could delay the process a bit, but in the end, it won't change the outcome. I clenched my fists. I was tired of my dad's games, his manipulation, his ability to always make everything about him. But something in me changed at that moment. I wasn't afraid anymore. I no longer felt like a child begging for the attention of a father who never loved me. Now I was an adult, and I was in control of my life. The next few days were tense, but my maternal family supported me every step of the way. My maternal grandfather and uncle assured me that they would take care of the legal costs, and that I didn't have to worry about anything. Meanwhile, the lawyer worked quickly. Within days, he presented evidence of all of my dad's suspicious transactions, including the funds transferred to his wife's accounts. We also found records of the original deposits from my mom's family, and proof that the money was intended solely for my benefit. Basically, we had everything to prove that my dad had committed fraud. And when his lawyer received the evidence, everything changed. One night, my phone rang again. It was my dad. I ignored it, But then a message arrived. "Let's talk, please." I felt a chill. He had gone from fury and threats to asking to talk to me. My maternal grandfather saw my expression and came over to read the message. "Don't do it," he warned me. "Don't fall for his game." But this time, I felt like I had the upper hand. So I replied, "What for? I have nothing more to say to you." It took him a few minutes to reply. "I don't want this to turn into a legal mess. We can work this out between us." I laughed humorlessly. "There's no us anymore. You sealed your fate when you kicked me out of the house." Several minutes passed before he wrote again. "I can't lose everything. Not like this." I didn't reply. That was the last time he tried to contact me. Weeks later, his case completely fell apart. His lawyer withdrew when he saw he had no way to win. The court ordered him to return what was left of the trust and to pay additional compensation. I didn't recover all the money he stole from me, but I recovered enough to cover my studies and start over. My dad, on the other hand, lost almost everything. Without the trust, his finances crumbled. His wife didn't take long to leave him when she saw that he could no longer maintain the lifestyle he had promised her. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.